That's the wrong Alan. I'm Alan the Little, and it's Alan the Big, who the house belongs to. I've described him a lot of different ways. Let me take you back a little bit in history. It is early in the public ministry of Jesus, and he has just delivered what would become known as the Sermon on the Mount. And in that sermon, he has discussed his understanding of a life that pleases God. Now, the impact of Jesus is growing. The crowds are getting larger, and even more interesting, the Jewish religious leaders are beginning to watch his every move. The sermon is over. He's coming down the mountain. And look what Jesus does next. Matthew chapter 8. When he came down from the mountainside, large crowds followed him. A man with leprosy came and knelt before him and said, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." Jesus reached out his hand and touched the man. "I am willing," he said. "Be clean." Immediately, he was cured of his leprosy. Now, we have to take into consideration the first century attitude of the Jews towards lepers. If you look in Leviticus chapter 13, it describes how they were to tear their clothing, and they were not to take care of their hair. It was all matted and it was dirty, and they were required to wear a covering over their face. And as they passed by other people, they were to cry out, "Unclean! Unclean!" constantly warning people to stay away for fear of being defiled. And from the perspective of the Jewish authorities, to get too near to a leper was to jeopardize one's righteousness and one's reputation. Now, in our verse that we read, the leper comes near to Jesus, but not too near. Tell me, what does Jesus do? He touches him. He actually touches the leper. He didn't need to touch the leper to heal him. There were already instances in Jesus' ministry where he just simply said the word. There were instances where he was miles away and people were healed. But in this situation, Jesus touched the leper. And in Mark's account, it said that Jesus was moved with compassion. Think about it. He touched a man who had probably not felt the touch of another human being in years. And now he was experiencing the loving, gentle, and in this case, healing touch of Jesus the Christ. Now, we've got a problem here, or a situation here, because in the eyes of the Jewish authorities, what has Jesus done to himself? He has defiled himself, right? He has touched a leper, and as far as the Jewish authorities were concerned, he was of no account anymore. He had disqualified himself because he was impure. Now, Jesus seems to ignore this altogether, because in the sermon, he just took on their legalism. And now with the leper, he is telling them, now, let me show you what I mean. And that's exactly what Jesus is doing to the church. He is modeling the kind of behavior that he expects from us, the church. When we have the heart of Jesus, when we reach out and touch the needy, the dispossessed, miracles happen. Lives are changed, and the church becomes a vessel of goodness. The church, the fellowship of believers, the koinonia, where we commit to each other as to Christ. But it's more than potlucks and more than socializing. It is a deeper level of commitment of the church working together to serve others. And in truth, we grow better together. This is where we learn to love. This is where we take on Christ-like qualities. And also, we serve better together, because it's in the context of the church where we become efficient stewards. Stewardship. This is where a steward is someone who takes care of something that belongs to someone else. It is owned by someone else. And even though the steward is responsible for how it's used, he or she must never forget who the steward is. We live at this stage in the 21st century. We are the richest Christians the world has ever known. We have the technology to send help, to send medical supplies, you name it, to virtually any place on the planet in a matter of hours. So from relationships and resources, we are stewards of everything we touch. And we are essentially stewards of everything we see. We are stewards because it all belongs to someone else. It is owned by someone else. Our passage, for today comes from Matthew 25. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world." Now, listen to the rest here. "For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." We are stewards of something that belongs to someone else, and that someone is Jesus the King, and he is coming back. So if you consider stewardship, look at it this way. The example of Jesus, the church, the fellowship of believers, you put those two together, and we become a powerful instrument for helping others. And we serve out the true role of the church today. Canyon Hills, as David was describing, we should be considering our role as members of this church and our giving and our stewardship. God bless us as we reflect upon our responsibilities. And also, I thank you from this perspective. I thank you for listening and actually receiving the word.